Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am still at my mom's house. I figured that it was really hot today. It finally cooled off. I figured I would sit on the porch because it's still hot as fuck in there, and I'll tell you about a book that I recently read that I really liked. So today I wanted to talk to you about We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. This is the same author as the person who wrote The Disreputable History of Frankie Landau Banks, which I have read. I haven't talked about it on this channel at all. I liked it. It wasn't ever one of my favorites, but I thought that it was really solid as a novel. So this one came out, and since I hadn't been blown away by Disreputable History, I figured that maybe I would wait on this one, wait until it came out in paperback, that I didn't really need it right away, but the reviews on it were so universally good that I kind of got intrigued. They were also being really cagey about what the plot was. So this is going to be a bit of a weird review. I think I'm going to do sort of a basic intro for those of you that haven't read it and don't really know anything about it, and then I will tell you when to leave and then talk about spoilers, because it's kind of hard to talk about the book without talking about spoilers. So We Were Liars is about a girl named Cadence. She is a member of the Sinclair family. She is the oldest daughter of the youngest generation. There's 3 generations that are important in this novel. There's the grandfather. The grandmother is kind of important, but she dies fairly early in the timeline, and she dies sort of before the pivotal point in the timeline. And then there are their 3 daughters, so Cadence's mom and her 2 sisters, and then Cadence, her 2 older cousins, their sort of step-cousin Gat, and then a couple younger siblings. I don't remember exactly how many there are, maybe 2 or 3. Cadence is an only child, which is sort of relevant later. She is very close with Johnny, Mirren, and Gat, they're all about the same age. Gat is their step-cousin, and she kind of ignores all of the younger ones. She doesn't even really call them by name most of the time. She just calls them the littles. Most of this book takes place during summers, and she refers to them by number. So like summer 15 is the summer when she was 15, and most of the plot takes place in summer 15 and summer 17. And so the present day is summer 17, and then there's a lot of flashbacks to summer 15. And basically the point is that something happened in summer 15 that she can't really remember, but it was something bad. It was some sort of accident, and she is now very changed because of it, and she can't remember what happened, and every time she asks, everyone says that she needs to figure it out for herself, because when the accident first happened and she was in the hospital, she kept asking what happened, and then they would tell her, and she would get extremely upset, and then she would forget, and then she would ask again. And so eventually the doctor said that they couldn't keep upsetting her like that, and they needed to just let her figure it out on her own. So it's almost a mystery novel in a way, where she's trying to piece together the memories of what happened. The way that it's written is beautifully stylized. It's almost like a poem because it's told in first person, and it's very much just sort of how it falls out of her head, because her memory is broken, because her knowledge is broken, her style of telling the story is broken. It's almost like freeform poetry. So it really worked for me. It might not work for other people, but I really liked the stylization. I love when form has a purpose, like when it's something different and interesting and has a narrative function within the story as well. So I thought that part was really cool. There are all of these things that are going on in the story. There's references to fairy tales, there's references to King Lear. She's constantly sort of telling stories to herself that eventually sort of become more and more specific, and you realize that she's sort of telling her own story to herself in this fairy tale version. Like, she's sort of warping her story into these fairy tales in order to deal with it. And so I just thought that it was really beautiful, and it was very sad, but I thought that it was really good. So I think that is the non-spoilery version. So if you haven't read it and you care about spoilers, you should probably leave now. Okay, so now, assuming that everyone is gone, so the reveal that the liars were all dead actually came as a surprise to me. And then it was one of those things where you look back and it's almost like a Sixth Sense kind of thing, where suddenly you realize all these things, like they were never in company with anybody else, and they never really physically touch anything, and she is gone for all of summer 16, and then she comes back in summer 17, and they're all talking about how much she's changed, and she's like, you guys look exactly the same. They're wearing the same clothing, they haven't changed their hairstyles, like everything is exactly the same. There's just all these hints about the fact that they're dead that I didn't pick up, and I got that something was off, but, you know, at first I thought that maybe it was an assault, but then as soon as she says that, you know, I must have been raped or something, I was like, okay, well that's clearly not it, because they wouldn't just bring it up in the narrative halfway through the book. And then I thought, you know, once they set the house on fire, I'm like, oh, well that's a big fucking deal. But I still didn't realize that there was more to it, and then you realize, oh, the dogs died, and it's like, okay, maybe that's it. But then as soon as you found out that the liars were dead, I was just like, oh no, that's it. And that's for real, and that's not changing, and this unreliable narrator has just made her final reveal, and that's done. That's it. And you can't take it back. And I was so upset about that. Like, I really like unreliable narrators. I find the way that you can tell story that way really interesting, and also I feel like in a way we're all sort of unreliable, and so it sort of cuts to sort of a core part of humanity, in that the way that we tell our stories is inherently warped by our own perception of them. But that part was really sad to me, and I didn't like that. And even the cover is a clue, because there are only 3 of them on the cover, and I didn't know why. It's the scene from the last part of the book when they're leaving, and oh my god. There's a lot going on in this book. Like, I really liked the repetition of 3 and how 3 is important, like with King Lear and the 3 different things, and like how in fairy tales 3 is a very important number. And I really liked the way that privilege is discussed in these books, the way that it is very damaging to her mothers to be raised in privilege, because they have no sense of how to take care of themselves. They all have failed marriages, and they're all sort of becoming vulturistic towards their grandfather because they sort of view him as their safety net, and they feel entitled to his fortune. And then the way that the liars are very sickened by the way that their parents are acting. Like, I believed it and I understood it, and how, you know, her grandfather is telling this story about the ivory elephant and how he's all proud of it, and then she's like, no, but ivory is outlawed for a reason, and you telling this story about how you beat the trade laws doesn't make you sound cool. It makes you sound like someone who just wants what he wants and doesn't care about the consequences. And then the way that, you know, he's acting so different after they all die, and how he keeps calling her Mirren. I didn't understand why he kept calling her Mirren, and oh, it's just so awful. And the way that the house is different, the reason that the house is different, and you know, there's just so many things, and like how she goes into Gat's room and she leaves the book there and he's not there, and the bed it's made like no one's been sleeping in it, obviously, because they're all dead, and the way that she's been giving everything away, and just there are all these hints that I didn't see. And it's a short book. I read it in a morning. Like, I picked it up and then read until I was done, and it's just a very intense reading experience. And there's a lot of things that happen in it, like the discussion of racism with Gat, and how he's sort of ostracized from the family just because of the fact that he's of Indian descent, and the way that his father has asked to marry his girlfriend, who is the member of the Sinclair family, and how she refused because her grandfather would cut her off. Like, it's so fucked up. And you see why they did it, and why they burned the house down. And it just, the one thing that bothered me about the story is that I don't understand why the rest of the family was willing to forgive Cadence. And I'm not totally sure if that's because they didn't realize that she'd done it, or if they just realized that it was an accident. But like, personally, I would not forgive someone who burned a house down and killed my children because of it. Like, I wouldn't be that rational about it. Like, even if they were all in it together, even if it was an accident, like, even if she were the only one alive and she had any hand in the death of my child, I don't think that I would be able to forgive her. But yeah, that was the one thing that I felt was maybe a little off, but I understand what she was doing with it, and, you know, it didn't bother me too much, but that was maybe the one thing. Some common threads that I've noticed between her writing is that she's very interested in discussions of privilege. Like, both of her books have featured families that are very, very wealthy. That seems to be something that she is interested in discussing and critiquing. She also seems to be interested in sort of the power that women can have in society and the limitations that are put on that power. So yeah, there are some really interesting themes in the book, not just about unreliable narrator and, you know, grief and tragedy, but there's also a lot of social commentary that she likes to put into her novels. So that can work in some cases better than others. I think it was maybe a little bit heavy-handed in Disreputable History. I think that's maybe why I didn't completely fall in love with it as much as I could have. Although it was still, like I said, it was still a great book. It's about basically a girl in a boarding school who becomes a criminal mastermind and, you know, orchestrates this whole series of really elaborate pranks in this boarding school. But this one is a much more, it's a much stronger critique of privilege, I think, but I think it also has more nuance than possibly Disreputable History did, and it's a little bit less heavy-handed, so I'm interested in seeing what she comes up with after. It's a standalone book, it's not part of a series, so it's We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. Hopefully if you've gotten to this part you've already read it, because I just spoiled the entire book, but I let you know. It's your own fault if you stayed through the end and you hadn't read this book. I think possibly like White Cat, which is the series that I just did my last video on, this book might improve upon rereads, because once you know everything that is going on, you can go back and look for the hints that are there all along that you didn't realize were hints. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. It goes, like I said, very quickly. I read it in a couple of hours, so it's not very long. So hopefully if you've gotten this far, you've already read it, but if you haven't and you don't mind the fact that I just spoiled it for you, then you should go pick it up. It was We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!